A jam-packed agenda for today's meeting.
Yeah, you guys gotta be really on it. We've been placing bets if we can stick to the allotted times.
Given how long it is, I do hope we have a break at some point.
Would you like a break?
I would appreciate
How about
Whenever you
an
decide.
hour in, perhaps? Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Okay. I say we'll give her one more minute, but I think we need to get moving.
Yeah.
I
Gonna
don't
mute
like to-
myself and shout at her.
She's always late anyways. Let's just start.
Let's start. Okay, let's call the meeting to order at.
Oh, no, it's me. Hold on, it's me. It's me letting people in here. It's my fault.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, okay.
All right.
Oh, there's Allison. Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Okay.
I gotta get that.
Okay. We're just going to call the meeting to order. It's, I don't know, 2:01 or 2:02. So welcome, everybody. As everybody said, there's a long and comprehensive agenda for us to address today. And so we'll try to keep everything hopefully on schedule. But there's a lot of important things for discussion. So I think that the most important thing at this point is that we have a fulsome discussion on the points that are going to be brought forward to us. So we'll commence. The first point is an approval of the agenda. Everybody's had a chance to look at it. Any proposed late items to be brought forward? Hearing none.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Rob. And seconded, please. Thank you, Joyce. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That page. Okay, adoption of minutes, point number 2. Minutes of May 14th, the Financial Advisory Committee minutes. The recommendation of the meeting minutes of the FAC meeting held May 14th be adopted. That's a recommendation coming forward. Is anybody prepared to propose it? Sorry, Joyce. Seconded. Thank you, Michael. Any amendments before we approve them? Hearing none, I request a motion to approve the adoption of those minutes, please.
Aye.
Robin and Joyce, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, any public comments to be brought forward that we're aware of? Anything, Steph? I can't hear you. No, nothing? Okay, so we'll move on to the next point, action items. And a review of action items. We have 5 minutes set aside for that. Is there anything specifically that we've got identified for that? Because we have business arising primarily.
I identified 3 things from the action items. There was the island composting.
Yes.
That I've been working with Carla on the report that's included in today's agenda. And so updates, I've worked with her on the cash forecast and operating statement and payback analysis.
Yep.
So I recommend that that discussion be included as part of a lot of the follow-up items will be covered in her presentation. So
Fair enough. Yeah, this was the separate 4.1. So
Yeah.
Thank you, Raj. I appreciate that.
that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We
Well,
also had the,
Sorry,
oh,
go ahead. No, please.
There was a COVID-19 financial impact communication action item. So I just wanted to give you an update on that. And so the municipal communication on COVID-19 has been focused on initiatives regarding safety and community, safety for staff in the community.
Mhm.
I discussed this with Sophie and we both felt that it would be more appropriate to communicate the financial impact on revenues and expenditures in our year-end annual report and on financial operations. And in any event, this message has also been received by council and the public through the minutes of the Finance Advisory Committee.
Mhm.
So that is the recommendation on the follow-up on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
And The last item in the action items that I could identify was a credit card fees bylaw question. So in accordance with the community charter, any fees that are collected by a municipality need to be approved by bylaw. So myself, I'm certain that we must specify this recovery in a bylaw, but we've requested confirmation of that through our legal advice portal with Lidstone and Company, and we're just awaiting confirmation. It was mention of a fees and charges bylaw in that action item. So currently, BIM's fees and charges are sprinkled throughout the various bylaws that we have that deal with the topic. We don't have a consolidated fees and charges bylaw. It is best practice for municipalities to have a single consolidated fees and charges bylaw that contains all of the fees and charges that a municipality charges, because that's conducive to the annual review of fees and charges. That is on staff's work plan. So in the interim, staff will ensure that the fee for the recovery of credit card charges is specified in an appropriate bylaw in the short term. And subsequently, it'll be incorporated into a proposed fees and charges bylaw, which I imagine we would bring forward to this committee and eventually take forward to council. And work plans allow. It's on legislative, well, on corporate services work plan in conjunction with finance to develop that. It is quite a time-consuming task because it would involve bringing forward all of the bylaws that contain fees and charges and changing the references in those.
Appreciate that. Any further requests for clarification on that point? Seeing none. Anything further as it relates to action items that have not been brought forward? Hearing none, we'll now move on to business arising from the minutes.
Brad,
Yes, Allison.
I'm not quite sure about Raj's answer to number 4. I think we were raising that because there's been a lot of press that all the municipalities are losing a lot of money because of during COVID. And I guess, so to wait till year end, I mean, the line in it was, you know, in the context of the community center and things. So wanting to send a message that we're not in the same dire financial straits that that we're hearing Vancouver and some of the other municipalities saying they are. So
So what I would suggest perhaps is Sophie and I had agreed that it would be an awkward message to send out at this point as a standalone message. So perhaps if there is more messaging on COVID-19 in the fall, we could incorporate that message, but to send it as a standalone message it seemed a little bit awkward, but we can discuss that with Liam. And I haven't had the discussion with Liam on that. I've just discussed it with Sophie so far. See what would be, how it would be appropriate to communicate that message. I do see Allison's point in communicating that to the public in contrast to what other communities are facing. So it's just a matter of how and when that message is delivered.
well, maybe we can address that when we get to the review of the 6 months financials.
I was going to suggest that. Yes.
Okay. I know we did, and Allison, we did, it is noted in the minutes to the last Finance Advisory Committee, which are made public and shared with council. So that was a point that I was making earlier.
Yeah.
It has been communicated through those.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyway, we're on to business arising from minutes. 5.1, community center operating costs and debt servicing. And Raj?
Thank you. So flyer containing the relevant information on the capital and operating costs and other important information about the community center was mailed out to Bowen Island residents last Friday. FAC and Community Center Steering Committee were asked to provide input and comments on the draft business plan and financial components to be included in the messaging via email prior to that mailing. So I'd like to thank you all for your valuable feedback, which was reviewed by the staff team and taken into consideration in the messaging. due to the sensitivity of timing to get this messaging out, I do apologize that unfortunately we weren't unable to wait until this scheduled FAC meeting to have a full discussion about all the issues at the table or at our computer screen here. So what I've done is, if Steph, actually, could you bring my PowerPoint presentation up, because I've got some PowerPoint slides to accompany this explanation. So what I've done is I have extracted the financial information from the mail out flyer into the PowerPoint screen. So if you could just advance one more, please, Steph. So we address the information in two components, as in the capital component and the operating component. And the capital cost message that was intended for the community is that the capital cost of the project is $14.5 million. It's to be funded as followed: 1.2 million from municipal reserves, 1.3 million through community fundraising, 7.9 million through the Infrastructure Canada grant, and an additional 4 million in funding is required, which the municipality proposed takes place through long-term borrowing. And approximately 1/2 of the long-term borrowing will have a financial impact on taxpayers. The other half, which is related to the construction of the municipal hall, will be offset by a reduction in rental costs of an amount equivalent to the debt servicing cost of that loan. The impact to the average property owner on Bowen will be about $50 a year for the capital component of the project. And we were conservative when we arrived at this estimate, which was developed when borrowing rates were significantly higher than they are today. So it's very likely that this cost will be lower than $50 a year. And Steph, can you go forward to the next slide?
Can I ask a question, Raj,
certainly.
before you go?
Yeah.
Because it came up in discussion earlier, and I noted that capital reserves that were provided, it was done in 2 increments. It was done an initial one for 750,000, and then a second approval by council for 450,000 to come up to the 1.2. In the narrative and in the reports that we showed, it indicated that the 450 would potentially be paid back from fundraising. So I don't see that. I mean, I see it's mentioned in the business case, but I don't see it showing up anywhere else. It shows it simply as the 1.2. And is that the intention, or is there plans to have fundraising to pay back the 450,000?
So that part of that 450,000 is supposed to come through the fundraising. So at the end of the day, the municipal reserves had a balance of about 1.2 million. It was anticipated there would be a full 1.2 million contribution to the project from reserves.
Okay, but in the narrative, it talked about the 1.2, including approval for 450,000. So is that counted twice, or is that in addition ultimately until it's paid back? Because I understood that fundraising was at 1.34 million.
So essentially what that's indicating is fundraising needs to be 450,000 higher than the 1.3. So 1.3 raised amount would go towards the project. And essentially what was discussed at the community center steering committee was the 450,000 would be repaid back through fundraising.
So ultimately
above the 1.3.
Okay, but ultimately the 1.2, which is currently in reserve towards the project, would that in fact fall back to 750,000 after that fundraising is complete?
Yeah, my understanding is it wouldn't. That essentially those funds for fundraising were over and above the $14.5 million. But like the cost of the fundraising coordinator and fundraising costs were not included in the $14.5 million budget. That's why it was going to be paid back.
Oh, okay.
Fred, it's Allison here.
Hi, Allison.
Normally when you do a fundraising campaign, the fundraising campaign pays for all of its costs.
Yeah,
So I think what Raj is trying to say is we want to fundraise $4 million, then we need to fundraise 4.5 so that after expenses, we have 4 to contribute.
okay. So, yeah, I mean, not having been experienced with this, I was kind of looking at it, trying to, 450 in and where it was going to come back, or if it's good. It's obviously in the project at 1.2, but you're saying the additional costs that will be incurred beyond the 1 point, the money that's been in place already then. Okay.
Yes,
And I'm not sure how much of that 450 we've actually spent.
Okay. But
that's the other, caveat. There is essentially whatever is spent should be recovered through fundraising. So the net contribution of fundraising to the project should be 1.3 million. So the fundraising costs incurred the cost of incurring those should be raised through fundraising as well.
okay. So the fact is the reserve will remain at 1.2 million.
That's correct.
Okay.
Fred, I have a point of clarification I'd like to make at this point.
Yes,
Well,
Joy?
you said that the calculation was based on higher interest rates than they are currently. And so I noticed somewhere in the capital projects outline, the calculations that were being done were at 2.18%. And then at the bottom of the page, you say that the MFA rate is 1.45%. So is that the difference? I couldn't figure out why we would be calculating based on 2.18%. I mean, that's the going rate right now in the market is 2.14 at a minimum, at a maximum.
So the calculations that arrived at the $50 a year, Joyce, were done when the indicative rate from MFA was over 3%. It might have been 3.5%, and we haven't changed that calculation because we didn't want to continually be changing the message to the community. The 2.18 rate was the indicative rate a few weeks ago. So I had done my analysis. My analysis that's provided to the Finance Advisory Committee is based on the 2.18. And that indicative rate has recently changed again. When I checked on the MFA website, it's, I believe, 1.43. It's less than 1.5%. So we have been very conservative in our estimates here.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Raj, just 2 quick points of clarification. One is the rationale behind the 30 years amortization versus like 20. And also just the cost to date. Are they included in the 14.5? And how have they been paid for so far?
So the costs to date have been included in the 14.5, and they're being paid through a drawdown of the reserves. So
That's the 450 we were talking about.
1.2 million has been drawn down.
How much?
A portion of that has been drawn down. I'd have to take a look. I haven't got that with me right now.
Okay.
I can shoot you an email. If you shoot me an email, Rob,
Okay.
let the entire Finance Advisory Committee know what we spent year to date.
And the 30 years?
Who's speaking, please?
The 30 years has been used essentially because that is the standard or the allowable amortization. So if you changed that 30 years to a shorter term, it would have a higher tax impact because your annual debt servicing cost would be much higher.
Yeah.
So I mean, some organizations strive for a 20 or 15-year amortization, but that means that your annual servicing costs will be much higher, and that would imply a higher tax rate increase to service that debt.
Do you know how much
Awesome.
higher?
Sorry.
And that 30 years also
Okay.
relates to the life expectancy of the facility. So from that perspective, it is reasonable as well.
Okay. Allison?
Well, that was going to be my question. I would hope the life expectancy of the facility is more like 50 years with some maintenance or repairs. I mean, but I think you're allowed to borrow over a term that is a maximum of 30 years or the the lesser of 30 years or the life expectancy of what you're borrowing for. And I would hope the life expectancy is more like 50 years at least.
At least.
Agreed.
It's, if I may just jump in for a moment it depends on an asset like this, we would be looking at, if we were talking about capital replacement costs, you'd be looking at the key components of the asset, and the building envelope should be about a 50-year life expectancy. But and structural as well, but mechanical and some of the other key elements may be less than that. So you've got heat pumps and other mechanical elements that would have more like a 25 to 30 year life expectancy.
Yeah, that makes sense to me in terms of the amortization for 30 years on the debt. I don't personally. Okay, go ahead, Raj.
Thank you. Can you advance to the next slide, Steph? So I'm going to shift my conversation over to operating costs. So the incremental operating costs of the new community center are anticipated to be $110,900. And this will impact the average property. This will have an impact of about $47 to the average property owner. So the combined impact of the capital and operating components of this project will be about $97 a year to the average property owner. And can you advance to the next slide?
One question.
Oh, sorry, can we go back? Yeah.
Well, can you, I haven't seen it anywhere in this. It's in our budget. And what is the definition of average property owner?
The average definition of an average property owner is the average assessed value of a property on Bowen, which is assessed at about $1.1 million. So if your property is assessed at, I mean, as you know, property tax rates are based on your assessed value. So for those people whose properties are assessed at above that amount, they'll be paying more. And for those people whose properties are assessed below that amount, they'll be paying less.
So I guess my point of asking that is for people to figure out how much it's going to impact them. They don't know what the average property value is. So is that in an FAQ somewhere or something?
I'll take that up with Sophie, and we can include the average value in an FAQ. I haven't seen it in there, and to me, I guess it's just become intuitive because we communicate that during the budget process. But that's a good point, Allison.
In the bit, this is Fred here. Would that be just a point to add in on the business case, which has some of the breakdowns?
If it's going to get reprinted or updated, yeah, but
Yeah, it's in draft. We could do that as well.
I just think it, could add a line to the effect or somewhere where it's noted about the increase that it's reflecting an average value of whatever.
Yeah. Fred.
Yes.
Fred, Michael here. We use the word average and we use the word median. I'm presuming that if we talk about the median price and the average price, to all intents and purposes, we're talking about the same price.
yeah.
Believe it would be very similar. I don't think there would be much difference, Michael. I mean, it may be a slight difference.
It doesn't look at not to be pedantic, but you might just, the word median has been used several times in various discussions, conversations, notes, etc. So I don't mind whether it's median or whether it's average, but let's if they are the same, let's say median stroke average, just so we don't get people confused on terminology.
Yeah, I'll have a look at that to confirm what the difference is between the median and the average before doing that.
You might actually want to change the bottom wording on this schedule we got, because you talk about average annual contribution per household. Really, it's the annual contribution per average household.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those of us that are going to be paying more.
Steph, can you forward to the next slide?
Please.
So I've created a summary of the detailed schedule that is in your agenda package here of the revenue expenditure components, essentially with the community center and without the community center, which reflect the without community center reflects the actual cost for 2019. what was requested during the email feedback from the FAC.
Mhm.
So in terms of our revenues, the impact on revenues of having a community center would be about 133,000. And that will come from increased program revenue, grant funding from the Community Foundation Endowment Fund for the new facility, and rental revenue from the new facilities. The rental of facilities was based on research that Shauna and Jackie had done during the development and before the development of the business case on rental rates that are charged by other comparable communities, and also by taking into consideration the timing of availability of the various spaces there.
Mhm.
And then in terms of the expenditures, the increase in operating expenditures is expected to be 244,300. And it's based on the assumptions of anticipated staffing needs of the new facility and taking into consideration the reduction of rental costs of current facilities that are rented for programming and increased insurance and maintenance costs. The net difference between those two is 110,900. And the 110,900 in annual increase in annual operating costs, net operating costs, will translate to about a 2% increase in property taxes, which is about $47 to a household assessed at the average value on
Mhm.
both.
Can I just?
Raj,
Sorry, go ahead. Zach?
Raj, just a quick clarification, because I was under the impression that every 1% equates to 50 grand. But am I wrong about that?
No, you're right. It's about 55 grand for every 1%. So this is $111,000 increase,
Yeah, okay.
which
So it'll be
is
2%.
2 times that amount.
Thank you. Allison?
Yeah, I guess my big concern with all of this is I don't think the interest or the debt servicing is an operating expense.
The debt servicing is included in the capital analysis. So we talked about the borrowing.
We've got expenditures of without 819.
Yeah.
And 575. The recreation, and then in the municipal hall one, you've got 270,500 for operating. But you've got in that 270,500 is the line called debt servicing.
So what are you looking at, Allison?
So I'm looking at the detailed schedule.
Okay.
And then I'm looking at your summary schedule, but it's misleading to me. We're busy telling everybody it's revenue neutral. And when I think of operating costs, I think of what it costs to operate the facility. And to me, debt servicing is not an operating cost.
Okay.
And so I think it would be clearer if you called it municipal hall facility operating costs. What's 270 less 105? So that's about 165. And then had another line called debt servicing and rent, just so that it's very clear that those two things.
We can look at the presentation of that. The only reason I had included it here for the municipal hall facility portion was to demonstrate that it is cost neutral. So there's a reduction in rental and an increase in debt servicing. So people would clearly see that the borrowing for the municipal hall is not costing any extra. That's the reason we included in the municipal hall facility operating costs. We haven't included it in the expenditures for the community center portion.
Well, that was the other thing. I thought we were saving some money on rent that we were not going to be paying for the children's center, for example.
We are, and that's incorporated in the rental cost.
Under municipal hall or in rent?
In the recreation center area.
So that's where, so the rent of municipal hall is 105,000.
Yes.
And the debt servicing is only 105,000 in total?
For the municipal hall portion, that's correct.
Well, where's the portion for the fitness center, for the rec center? You've got interest.
So the
on
rec
it.
center portion was, if you go back a couple of, we communicated this to the public in 2 portions. So if you go, we haven't included it in this operating statement. So it's communicated in the capital cost portion. So if you go back a couple of slides, Steph, right there, sorry, this slide right here is what communicates the debt on the community center.
And so where have we actually told, so we're only gonna pay $105,000 to service this $4 million debt. Or we're only paying 105 to service 2 million. So where's the debt servicing for the other two?
Sorry, where is the debt? Here,
Okay,
you
well,
broke up
that's an honest thing. You're throwing half of the debt servicing in as an operating cost and you're ignoring the other half. There's no consistency, I guess, is my problem.
It will,
And that's-
yeah, I guess all we were trying to do was separate the messaging between the debt servicing and the operating costs of the recreation center. So if we're only talking about the recreation facility, what we were trying to do is separate the cost of debt servicing, and it was a separate communication piece. And then right beside it, we did have the operating cost as well. So what I've done in these snips here, you take a look at the actual brochure, they're kind of beside each other, capital and operating pieces. So
for the person who says,
so the
okay,
debt servicing cost does become an operational cost, so to speak, in year 2 of operation. We're just communicating it.
okay, all I'm saying is if we're going to say, let's try and raise $4 million so we don't have to borrow any money, then where is somebody going to look at a line and say, this is what it's going to cost to operate municipal hall and the rec center without any debt? That number doesn't show up anywhere.
Okay.
Do you think there's a chance that we're going to raise $4 million, Allison?
I'm not giving up on it.
Oh, good for you.
There's lots of competing projects coming up that are.
Yeah, but we don't have to raise all this by the time the referendum's over. We've got another year to raise all that money.
Okay, well, obviously this is the brochure. So you've got the business case itself, right?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at this spreadsheet that was sort of a separate, the updated business case spreadsheet.
Yeah, I think it's the full business case because we're actually looking at, obviously it's something else right now, but
Yeah.
in terms of information, but I mean, if it's
I don't have
possible,
any
again,
problem
maybe to
with this
consider,
one.
Raj, looking at the business case to see if
Yeah.
there's a way of identifying that particular position. Again, it could be a note or something to the end.
Okay.
After
Yeah, we can
following
have-
the operating budget,
Okay.
like point number 11 or 12 or something.
It's Liam here. I think in the business case, there is a note number 3 after that schedule that Allison has been speaking about, which is this schedule here. Note number 3 does say that the full debt servicing cost, including principal and interest on $4 million at approximately 2% interest rate over 30 years, is estimated to be $210,000 a year. Debt servicing costs for operating include interest only, as the principal portion is a statement of financial position. This cost is split between recreation and municipal. But we could easily highlight that more to bring it out so that it is more clearly stated, so that if people are wanting to know what is the full debt servicing cost, that
Well, I guess to me, people are wanting to know what it's going to cost to operate the facility. And operating is not debt servicing.
well, yeah. So then if you look at the schedule above, it only includes the interest portion of the debt servicing, right? So it does pull out the principal repayment portion. So it does summarize that the actual operating expenditures for the new facility and the programming for the new community center, not the Muni Hall, just the community center, is 1.1 million.
If I'm finding the schedule confusing, then what's Joe Blow Public?
Yeah, well,
What I'm
let's,
thinking about.
I mean, from my point of view, I mean, if it's contained within the business case or it's clear there, again, we're not able to look at, well, it's in a separate document, so we're going back and forth.
Well, I'm
Perhaps
looking at the business
we just
case.
want to make clear that that's identified.
Yeah.
Can we, is it a point that we can leave and ask management to address?
And I guess the other question I've got, about, well, are we going to talk about the numbers in the business case? Am I jumping ahead in the agenda?
I basically had the operating schedule in the agenda, and so if you move forward again, step one slide, sorry, one or two, yeah. So, back one. This one. So you've got the detailed schedule and
I'm looking at the details. So,
Which is in the
on
business
the
case.
condensed version of that schedule.
so I think Joyce was asking, and I was wondering, what were the actual 2019 recreation programming revenue?
So the actual 2019 program revenue is 193,700 as reported on your schedule.
So for 2019, so it was actually less than 2018.
Well, the schedule that I had sent you previously was 2018, and then I had taken 2018 costs, and then I had taken a factor for inflation to 2022 and inflated it. So now we've gone back to based on the feedback from the FAC, we revised this schedule so that the without community center column is reporting 2019 actual costs. There's been no inflation taken to take those costs up to 2022.
Okay, so I guess we don't have the detail for 2019 in the audited financials, and I was looking at the budget document, which said 2018 actual was 206,000, and we budgeted 206,000 for 2019. And
so what you're probably looking at is the community center with the teen center included. Possibly, Allison. I haven't included, I've specified that in the notes as well, but because the teen center is not a relevant,
it's not transferring.
any differences, it's going to be neutral in all respects. I haven't included any of the revenues or expenditures for the teen center, so that would have to be factored in if you're comparing to the financial statements.
Mm.
All right.
Maybe I could.
Oh, go ahead, Fred, sorry.
Just ask maybe one question. I'll comment afterwards, but overall, I noticed in looking at some of the financial reports, and it's I'll mention, I know Joyce mentioned to me at one point that we provide assistance to the school district under a grant program, which I assume relates to the school for having access. We pay a fee to use the facilities. But I noticed in the last financial report that there was an assistance by grant to the West Vancouver School District for $12,440. Is that something that's impacted by this arrangement with regards to the use of their facilities, and would that change as well?
I know that 12,000 is related to funding the salary of a coordinator, whether
That's the community school coordinator salary contract.
yeah.
Okay.
So, and whether that's impacted or not by this, I would have to check with Shauna.
It's not a significant amount, just one of those points. And if I just for a general comment, in my emails and discussion, I made obviously quite a few comments about expenditures and revenue. And I think recognizing that a lot of the development work was done probably as far as 18 months ago, I would think, on this project. And the fact that the complex is going to be still another probably 18 months plus out, that there may be an opportune time for management to have a close look at the budget as it nears completion of construction to identify, I guess, current costs and current requirements. I think a lot could be learned over that time frame. So for the points that I'd earlier raised, my comment is, okay, well, maybe, you know, if we look at it a year from now and see what, you know, rental rates are, see what kind of staffing requirements are, what the introduction of staffing positions into the structure, what timing that would be, and things such as the groups that have special access, including, you know, everything from weights to dance to fitness to all the things that are there, to ensure that they're paying their way. Because I think there's been a lot of discussion previously about some of these groups. It's expected that they were expected to pay their way through for having specially space and requirements and equipment. And it'll be an opportune time to evaluate whether in fact the structure that's in place in terms of fees and costs are appropriate. But I mean, a lot can happen in another year, I guess is my comment. And I think as part of a process, I think it would be certainly worth undertaking that formally at some point, at 6 months prior to, for example, of completion, if it's assuming it gets approved by referendum. And then that kind of addresses all the multiple zillions of points that I raised, sort of in a catchphrase to kind of place it sort of in a spot. Well, you know, it's something that we should look at in the future prior to actual operations beginning.
Right. Can I ask a question here?
Please.
Fred? So I'm not entirely aware of all of the financial positions and preferences in terms of an operating structure for this facility. I'm not aware of all of the preferences going into this project. But my experience is that very few community centers are financially sustainable on their own, and especially in a community of this size. The majority of community centers actually are subsidized by tax roll, and that there is an economies of scale that when you get into the larger facilities and larger communities, you can achieve that financial sustainability because you have things like Olympic-sized swimming pools, indoor tracks, and things that can generate significant revenue to offset those programs where you cannot generate significant revenue. And so I'm just curious to know from this committee and others on this, is that, you know, what was the intent to try to get this facility to that so that it was expenditure neutral, so that it was balanced in its financial sheets, or is because I think that might be a hard goal to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, I had made a comment to that effect at one point, but realistically, I don't expect that will happen. But I just think it's also an opportunity to be, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that basically, I mean, I can, rather than being fully accepting of everything at the time, I think people have to look closely to see if there are opportunities to optimize.
Right, for sure.
I'm not expecting it's going to be a break, you know, an even thing, but I don't want people to think, well, we don't really have to do that because we've got a position that's approved,
right,
and it's not required or expected. Well, I'd like us to step beyond what's generally accepted up front and to see if there are ways of doing it.
Yeah, that's great to hear, Fred. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I guess I wanted to just add to that. We developed the budget policies a number of years ago, and there was quite a bit of discussion about the recreation programs and things like that. And it was agreed that the principle would be that they had to recover the direct costs of operating. So the fee for attending the program would cover off the costs of setting up the program instructor, and I'm, you know, not exactly sure what the job description of a programmer is, but those direct costs, if you had to lease space and if you had to pay the instructor, those costs would all be covered we would be expected to be covered by the fees by the participants.
Right.
Fred, Michael here.
Yes, Michael?
Actually, I take your question the question pretty seriously, because we've provided all the figures we have, and we can discuss them all we like, but right now they're out there, and I don't think anything will change before September the 12th. However, one thing we haven't done is extrapolate the expectations and the numbers really for the public beyond the year of operation. And at some point, I mean, I've been involved in lots of capital projects, and we've certainly had to go and do various projections years on. So sooner or later, if this gets the nod, this project, I think that is something we're going to have to come back to look at what the expectations are over a period of time. And a couple of, because we are kind of silent, or we've referred to it as Alison said a long time ago, but we certainly haven't been open on what these costs might look like in the second, third, fourth, fifth years of operation. And I think we are going to have to tackle that, as any other project would have to tackle it.
Great. So we could do that, Michael. I think that's a good idea if we get the nod, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I think we already have part of the operating built into the 5-year fiscal plan, but it would be good to do a 5-year operating forecast.
I agree.
I concur.
Thank you, Liam.
I concur and can confirm that this operating schedule that we have is incorporated into the 5-year financial plan as well.
Okay. I think we're sounds like we're in agreement on that point. Okay.
I don't know, this is Joyce. I
Joyce?
don't know when I can make this comment, but I want to make it, and it's sort of as a follow-up to what Liam was saying in terms of sustainability. He opened the door for the comment. In the flyer, there was a paragraph that says the design of the community center may not have a swimming pool, ice rink, or whatever, but it could be a launching point for expansion opportunities. I really worry that that kind of comment has been put into the flyer, because what it does, and the comments I'm getting from the wide variety of people on the island, is what expansion and what's going to be possible. And there's a worry that there isn't enough land for the expansion. And that's where a lot of the worry about incorporating the municipal hall is as a part of this. I don't know what council is thinking of doing if the referendum is not a nod, but a negative response. And I'm worried that if it's a negative response, the reason why people will not be voting in favor of it, at least the people that are telling me that they're not going to vote in favor, is because of the incorporation of the municipal hall as part of that the focus should have been just the community center. I realize that this really isn't a finance committee issue, but I'm on the finance committee, and I'm concerned that we're putting all of our resources into this and maybe not addressing a really important issue. And Liam, and I know that you, thanks to Fred, I know that you answered that question in the undercurrent today, that the municipal hall, the federal grant will not necessarily go away if the municipal hall is not included. But I'm really worried about this, and I'm worried from a financial aspect, because we have devoted a lot of our staff resource, time, and energy to this. We can't afford to keep on failing. So
Right. If I may, Fred, if I
Please.
respond to Joyce. So
Please.
those are very valid concerns, Joyce. And since I started 3 months ago, I've been working with staff and socializing ideas with council about what a plan B looks like. We need a plan B if the referendum doesn't pass. We also need a plan B if our tender doesn't result in a positive bid. And so I've been basically building a plan B, a plan C, and a plan D. So I like to have contingency plans. It's part of who I am. So if, you know, I don't want to necessarily go into the details right now, but what those plans are, but I just hope that I can provide some confidence that we are really looking at that. The term about expansion, I think, has been used because there's a recognition that I'm hearing from those in the community that know the community better than me, that this community center doesn't address the needs of all. And so one of the big concerns I hear is from young families with young youth. So, you know, I think this facility does a great job at addressing needs of the littles, like the toddlers, because there's childcare, child minding, and it does a great job of addressing adults' needs. And so I know that I've been in conversations with a number of people about, like, well, what about the youth? What do we get for them? And so part of the expansion ideas that I've been hearing about is, like, it's just something as simple as a skate park. You know, can we get a skate park just north of the center? I don't think we're going to get a pool or we're going to get an ice rink or anything like that, like, for another 30 years or something, to be realistic about it. So I think that's what is on the minds of the people that I've been talking about. So I don't think nobody I've talked to has been thinking, oh, let's get a pool and let's get a rink.
I would say probably not a rink, but I've talked to a number of very wealthy people who would actually pay for the construction of a pool and establish an endowment fund for the operation of one.
Well, then let's start talking. Because I mean, that's just it, right? Like, my biggest concern about those kind of facilities and those kind of assets is they become severe liabilities, right? And I know too many communities in this province who have those pools, which are actually anchors, and they pull them down. And so if we can really generate an endowment fund to satisfy operating and capital replacement, well, then now we're talking a different game. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Joyce.
Allison here.
Okay.
Oh.
Just to follow up to Joyce's comment about the pool. We did a little bit of a study and handout on the costs of operating a pool, and I cannot remember any of the numbers, but I will find it and dig it out and send it to everybody. But
the average cost for a capital cost for a pool for a community of this size is between about $12 and $20 million, and the average operating cost is about $1 million.
yeah, so you'd have to have today's interest rates, Fred. What sort of an endowment fund? $10 million?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You don't have to convince me. I was part of an audit team. I was part of an audit team in Red Deer when the pool went into deep trouble. So no worries. I understand. I'm just saying I'm getting stuff from the community, including offers.
But maybe it's an opportunity. I think the point that's been raised as well, there's going to be some forums coming up and such, and it might be useful based on the comments that Joyce has raised. I mean, a lot of members here are well connected to what's happening in the community, just to be prepared for those kind of questions, or maybe be proactive and maybe addressing those points that of what you're really talking about. Like, I think it's logical what's being said, and I fully understand the cost of pools in small communities and what it means, and it's pretty brutal for a lot of communities. And so, but I think it's just sort of to establish expectations and be clear that the position of the municipality and the recreation area going forward. I mean, I just think I would be upfront about it to address it. Is that fair, Joyce? I don't know. Because I mean, there's going to be forums and there's going to be obviously more newspaper articles and coming up probably. And I think there's ways of addressing that type of thinking out in the community.
Yeah. Can we also just circle back to something that Allison was pointing out earlier, and I think Fred and Joyce were in agreement about maybe management can take away and work on providing better clarity, but I'm not clear on what that is, and if there's anything that we need to do on providing better clarity around the debt financing, I think is what it was. Just want to make sure we're capturing the action.
I think Allison was just talking about separating the debt servicing requirements from the operating expenses, because they're not viewed as necessarily as operating expenses. Is that fair, Allison?
Yeah, and,
It's like
and
a separate,
actually,
it's almost like a separate,
it's a
you know,
separate line, should be a separate.
yeah, to
line.
take it out of the
Yeah.
grouping of operational expenses. You'd have a subtotal and then put in your debt servicing, so you would be able to identify the numbers that
And
way.
I think if you did that, actually, I think it would show even more clearly the synergies of the contribution of having the two in the same place.
It's like adding
Because you
additional
show
lines.
the municipal operations costs going way down because no rent. And, you know, and some of those things. So I think it actually might help clarify that. Like,
So-
and the other was to change the wording at the bottom of that detail, that sheet where you said average annual contribution.
Yes.
It should say annual contribution for the average household of blank.
Yes.
Or, yeah, to
Per
fund the-
average, per average household. Yeah.
And then actually
Okay.
put the number in there.
Right. Okay. And so we're just literally adding a line to this table that's up.
I
on
don't,
screen.
yeah, I don't think you have to, you're not, yeah. I think that
Yeah.
would address it.
If
Right,
somebody
okay.
sends me the budget detail in an Excel sheet, I'll make the changes that I think should be made.
Okay.
Okay. All righty. Is there any other comments or questions that relates to the operating costs and debt servicing position? I think we've covered a few things, so are we ready to move on?
Can we, I don't want the detail now, but is there a working paper or worksheet that shows how the revenue numbers were arrived at? Like the hourly rates and stuff like that? Because I'm getting comments from people that we're over optimistic, and yet we've said conservative in our revenue estimates.
We do. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Lee. You take
I was just going to say, the page in the business case on page 13, the page above that detailed operating budget,
Mhm.
shows the
Oh, I got
potential.
you in front of me now, page 13.
It shows the potential revenue for each of the rental facility rooms and the number of hours that were estimated and the hourly
Yeah.
rate. And the hourly rates are actually really conservative low. And what we will likely do is amend those rates so that they're a sliding scale depending on the rentee, so who's renting it.
Yeah, and that was back to one of my earlier comments about that.
Right.
And again, it's
Yeah,
something you're
yeah.
probably going to want to do closer to when the facility is ready to go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. Anything else? Went a little bit over time.
If not, we've got on the next slide, a proposed recommendation, which I'm sure you will want to amend to incorporate some things that came up in the discussion. Oh, yeah, can we
Here, here it goes.
right there. So I'll just give you guys a second to read through that. Or I can read it to you. Actually, the proposed recommendation is that whereas the Finance Advisory Committee has reviewed the financial components of the capital and operating costs of the new community center contained in both the mail-out flyer and the projected operating budget for the new community center at the August 21st, 2020 Finance Advisory Committee. Therefore, be it resolved that the Finance Advisory Committee confirmed to council that the financial assumptions, operating revenue and expenditure information and capital cost information reported in the mail-out flyer and the projected operating budget are reasonable.
How about appear to be reasonable?
I do your best.
One audit student many years ago said would seem to appear to be reasonable. So,
Do we want to say anything about the fact that the assumptions will be revisited closer to completion of the facility or commencement of operations? I'm okay with appear to be reasonable, but I think we've also said, at least I've said, I don't know if anybody agrees with me, but that at least we'll look at it again just to make sure we're on track when the time comes and that we.
I think appear to be reasonable, and of course, they will be reviewed prior to, I mean.
Commencement of operations or,
Yeah.
So that would be something like, and that
And
the council directs staff to review in a
oh,
year,
right, okay, yeah.
or to review with the finance committee in a year.
Mm,
Well, I think it's a place for this committee to do it, to be involved at the time.
Yeah, can you change things on the screen? That
Okay.
proposed recommendation?
Yeah, sorry, it's this.
It's kind of flipping back and forth.
The PowerPoint is getting schizoid, so I've been just
Do
sticking
you,
with it.
I mean, I think you understand where we're coming from.
So
We're going to send this
also-
out as a draft anyway, right?
Oh,
The-
before it goes, yeah. But change the word "are" to appear to be reasonable.
Appear to be
then
reasonable.
add a-
And what was the last person who said?
and that council staff to review the operating expenditures and assumptions with the finance committee in 1 year from now.
Well, I think revenue and expenditures.
Yeah,
I mean, you're gonna look at both because you're gonna look at rates. You're gonna probably do new surveys to see
Okay.
what competitive rates are, et cetera, and maybe have a better, more defined understanding of how the facility is going to be used, because it comes together as you get ready to get it going. So my comment is that it's a review of revenue and expenditures. I would say within 6 months prior to the facility opening or something like that, or being the facility being operational.
Substantial completion.
Substantial completion, sure,
Yeah.
something like that.
And I guess does it need to be done as part of the annual budget process as well? Because it,
Yeah, we'll be doing that anyway, correct?
yeah, so as part of the annual budget process and 6 months prior to opening, because who knows that they'll think.
Yeah, I just think it's a deeper dive than you would normally do.
Yeah.
Because
Sorry,
it's
could you give me
brand new
those notes
facility.
again? There was a bit of glitchiness there. Appear to be reasonable, sorry.
Yeah,
What else did I miss?
and then the whole second,
Like
Yeah.
semicolon after reasonable.
or have another paragraph,
Yeah, sure.
yeah. And
Hmm.
you need the "and" after reasonable, I think.
This is all stuff that can happen later at my desk.
Okay,
You okay?
I need
You want us to
words.
say it? Or you want us to? You sure
Raj
know where we're
read it
coming
out. Let Raj read it out for Steph again, because he had it.
Thanks, Raj,
previously.
sorry.
from? Okay,
and
Hey, Raj.
and that council directs staff to review the revenue and expenditures 6 months prior to,
substantial completion.
substantial completion
And did we want the fact?
facility.
Sorry.
Substantial
Council directs staff to
completion.
review the revenue with the finance,
The revenue,
expenditures with the finance advisory committee.
well, revenue, how about review the revenue and expenditure assumptions, 6 months?
Right. With the finance advisory committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The width should probably go after assumptions.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Of the substantial completion of the facility.
Thanks, Liam.
And that'll do it.
Nice.
Okay,
All in favor?
do we,
I will make that motion.
thank you. Joyce, seconder,
I'll second it.
thank you. Any other points to be raised? Seeing none, all in favor?
all right,
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, that's done. We're moving on to point 5.2 on island composting facility, the hot rod system.
Sorry, Fred, there was very last minute changes. I didn't have a chance to consult with you, but that was pulled into the closed.
I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. That's fine.
Sorry, it was very late.
And you may have told me and I probably forgot.
Well,
That's okay.
okay,
No
thanks.
problems. Okay, so moving on to the next point then, new business. And 6.1, second quarter results, capital and operating. Raj?
Fred? So the financial schedules in the agenda package show a comparison of the general fund actual expenditures to June 30th to the budget by service or functional areas of the municipality. And I'm going to assume that everybody has gone through the report.
Please.
And
That's good.
kind of speak at a high level. So as at June 30th, year-to-date expenditures 3.2 million on the annual budget of, or 0.2 million on the annual budget of 7 million. So notably, given that we're halfway through the year, expenditures should be approximately 50% of the budget. We are at approximately 46% of the budget. And oh, actually, Steph, I have a PowerPoint that has, sorry, I'm just going to go back a step.
Okay.
Slide, if you can go back to the PowerPoint.
Okay.
You know, I thought your report, Raj, was pretty good. I didn't have actually many thoughts or questions on it. It was pretty straightforward.
I haven't got the whole report here. I just got a quick slide for that item. Yeah, next slide, Steph. Okay, so the numbers I was talking to are displayed here. That's why I was just kind of wanting the slide there. So we're at approximately 46% of budget. And some of the difference is due to timing when expenditures take place. And some of the variances are due to reduced spending activities due to the COVID-19 pandemic situation. For example, people are not able to attend, council or staff are unable to attend events in person. So there's some savings there as well.
Mm-hmm.
I provided in the report, I had provided variance comments on items where there was a variance plus or minus 5% of expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, I'm going to say that the operating expenditures are trending close to budget at mid-year. The third quarter review will be accompanied with a forecast of expenditures to year end and will provide a stronger indication of anticipated expenditures to year end in comparison to budget. And I can open the, and basically I'm going to just talk about the capital and then I'll open up the floor to any questions that you may have. So
Okay.
side, if you can go to the next slide, Steph. The 2020 budget for capital for the general fund is $6.3 million. In comparison, actual expenditures incurred at mid-year on the capital budget are $115,000. I mean, they're low in comparison to the budget. The budget does contain significant budget provisions for larger projects such as the fire hall, community center, multi-use path, culvert replacements, and the artificial turf field where spending has not started in the first half of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Further information on the progress and status of capital projects on those larger projects will be provided by the project managers later in the agenda and in the closed meeting as well. But in terms of financial impacts, I would expect some of that spending to ramp up in the second half of the year because the budget got approved in April. So we were getting quotes and preparing to do the work after that. And so, for example, the culvert works will be done in August and September during the fisheries windows. We're doing some investigative work on the multi-use path, but I'm going to let Patrick talk to a lot of those when he talks about the capital project.
And I see the field is being done right now.
The field
Yeah,
is-
they started it.
Yeah, AstroTurf. Yeah.
And the culverts.
Yeah. So third year review, you'll see a lot of those costs showing up in the financials.
Yeah. And I'll comment. I thought the report was good, Raj. And then based on where we are in terms of this far into the year, yeah, I think it's good information, but a lot of things don't become clear, as you said, until the end of the third quarter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't see anything that really popped out personally. Any other comments?
Fred, if it helps, I would be prepared to accept Raj's comments, and I compliment on his on what he's put in front of us, and accept them as are and move on.
Thank you. Actually, in the next slide, Michael, I do have a proposed recommendation. If you don't,
Okay.
well, actually, one of the other things I wanted to go
That was
over.
my question.
Yeah, Allison wanted to see the tax.
I
deferral.
forgot to go over that item, so I'm going to go over
That's
actually
fine.
and go to this slide right here. Thanks. The So essentially, taxation is our largest source of our largest source of revenue, and represents about 67% of our total revenue. So that requires some comments. So I thought I'd just give you a few updates on some of the statistics related to property taxation. So as of the middle of August, the number of properties deferring their taxes is down 31 in comparison to total deferments for the entire year of 2019. We're anticipating further deferrals for unpaid taxes between now and the end of the year. This year, there was a change in how the deferments are handled. The deferment system went online, and residents are now dealing directly with the province rather than channeling their deferments through the municipality. And as a result of that change, there appears to have been some confusion in the transition, and we're expecting that some of the property owners who thought they had deferred their tax hadn't. So we anticipate these deferments to trickle in between now and the end of the year.
Mhm.
I suspect that the number of deferments might be up slightly from 2019, but the numbers are generally similar. And in deferment, new deferment applications represent property owners who had not previously deferred their taxes and who are deferring them in 2020. So we have 20 additional deferral applications in comparison to the previous year, which is demonstrated on row 3 of that table. And in terms of the percentage of taxes collected as of the middle of August, we're at about 95%, which is comparable to last year.
That's good.
So part of the reason I asked that question was to do with my comment before about we're not in as bad a financial situation as some of the other municipalities. I mean, partly because we don't have any casinos that got shut for several months, or I think they're still shut. So just so looking at the budget, Raj, we only have about 1.5 million in revenue that isn't tax related. So, and that's, I'm not totally sure what, if user fees is, but so, and the grants is basically the small community grant and pretty predictable stuff. So we're in from a revenue perspective, we are in a good position.
We are in a good position, and I'm going to talk about that later in the agenda when I come to my COVID impacts update.
Yeah.
So I'll address the revenue impact of COVID later on in the agenda, if you don't mind, Allison.
And
so,
Raj, can I ask one persnickety question?
Mm-hmm.
Going forward, can we change the word deferment to delay? Because a deferment is a specified term and under provincial legislation for an actual tax deferment, which the province picks up through a tax deferment program.
well, that's what he's given us the value of, though, Liam.
Yeah.
We're talking about what.
Oh, these are actual.
Yeah, we're talking about the tax deferment program.
Oh, these are, perfect. Oh, well, maybe I should get with the program.
Sorry, you confused me there for a sec. I thought, oh my God, what if I missed the mark on?
Yeah, maybe I should like follow along properly. And
Anyway, I think it's a fabulous program.
Yeah, no, I asked the question because I thought it might be indicative because young families, you don't have to be a senior to or an over 55 to apply for it. There's also the catch-all section for families. So I just thought it might be, if a lot of people, A, hadn't paid their taxes, or B, a huge number more people had applied for deferrals, that would indicate, the financial health of our community. So the fact that 95% of the taxes have been paid and there's not a huge uptick on deferred, to me, says our communities, that our property owners are in generally good financial health.
yeah, it's the usual delayed payments that we would expect. Okay. Yeah, sorry, Raj, I apologize about that.
No worries.
Anyway, okay.
So if we can go to the next, if there's no, are there any more questions?
Yeah, one more, sorry. Is this going forward to council in the September meeting?
We can for information, yeah.
Yeah,
So I think it's a good news story to put a little paragraph into your report that about the tax revenue that has been collected and that our overall revenues have not been impacted.
okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, Raj?
Okay, there being no further questions, Steph, can you go to the next slide for the proposed recommendation on the mid-year review? It simply reads that Finance Committee confirmed to Council that the general fund and capital expenditures have been reviewed and that the FAC has no concern with the results reported at this point in time.
Good. Any
And
comments?
is pleased to see that the taxation revenue collection is the same as last year.
Would you put that in? I don't know if you'd put that in the recommendation, but.
Well, we have no concerns with the results. Yeah, okay, because we didn't, yeah, okay.
Okay.
I just, yeah.
Okay, no problems. All righty. Anybody recommending?
Yes, Fred.
Michael, seconded?
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, Joyce, thank you. All in favor?
Yeah,
Good, thank you. Okay, that's done. Thank you. Statutory reserve analysis,
Thank you, Fred.
6.2.
Steph, can we go back to the PowerPoint for item 6.2?
Sorry, Raj, I've got to get this recommendation into the minutes. One moment, please.
So maybe I'll start talking while Steph is putting the recommendation in. So statutory, again, I'm assuming everybody's read the report, so I'm going to hit the highlights of the report and I might get a little bit more detailed than I did in our financial review. So statutory reserves are reserves that are created by bylaw, and the bylaw will typically state the specified purpose of the reserve, and funds in the reserve can only be used for that purpose. So the staff report provides a listing and high-level purpose statement for BIM's 14 general fund statutory reserves. The report also provides a table which illustrates the balances for each of those reserves. So we have about $3,650,000 in general fund statutory reserves. Of the balance of these reserves, $2,619,000 is in, can we go to the next slide there? While I'm talking. One more forward. So this is a slide I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So essentially $2,619,000 is in reserves intended for asset renewal and replacement. There's 3 reserves. $958,000 is in reserves that will allow for investment in new assets depending on the purpose of each of these reserves. So what the reserve says money can be used for. And there's 74,000, and there's 9 reserves that contain funds, those funds. And then there's 74,900 in legislatively required reserves. And the 2 legislatively required reserves that we have are a parkland acquisition reserve and land opportunity reserve. Anecdotally, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about the operations and how money gets into the reserves. So anecdotally, the amount of revenue collected for capital in the financial plan is all contributed to statutory reserves. The 2020 contribution to reserves was $1,457,000. And an allocation is made to the specific reserves, taking into consideration the anticipated capital funding reserves for the upcoming capital year. So depending on what's been requested in the year, I'll take a look at what reserve balances are and what we need to put into those reserves to be able to fund those needs. Minimum required contribution to the capital renewal and replacement reserve is taken into consideration from my perspective in making that allocation. So according to my understanding of the required contribution to capital renewal and replacement reserve, I believe the contribution requirement is being met. In 2008, Council demonstrated its commitment to maintenance and renewal of its infrastructure by instituting a 1.5% annual property tax increase for purposes of capital renewal and replacement. This had allowed the contribution to maintenance of capital to have grown from cumulatively by about $650,000 to $1,457,000 since 2008. The 1.5% increase was to be applied for approximately 11 years, at which time it was anticipated that the contribution would be sufficient to address infrastructure replacement needs of the municipality. So the required annual contribution is a function of the age of our assets, the condition of our assets, the desired level of service to be derived from those assets, and the replacement cost of assets. We don't fully know all of this information at this time. Further work is required on our asset management plan to complete this work or to get this information. But given the age and condition and replacement needs of infrastructure in our recent capital budget years and in our projected five-year financial plan, staff are highly confident that the annual required contribution for reserves for capital asset renewal and replacement is substantially lower than required. And I'm going to basically open up the floor for questions and discussion. And then we can take a look at the recommendation out of this reserve, out of this report after that.
Okay, do we have any questions?
Brad, this
Yes.
was my agenda item. It's Allison. I don't know how to get back to the full screen. Damn it. Show thumbnail, but there we go. So what time? We're way behind on the agenda, aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm totally in total disagreement with Raj's comments about the capital replacement and reserve fund. We set that up in 2008 to be in addition to all the other amounts that were being contributed. And so them all getting rolled in together, I think this year's contribution should have been like 1.387 million, not 1 million. So I think I'm quite happy to defer this as a discussion for another day because we're not into next year's budget yet, but it's a very full and in-depth discussion that I think we need to have. We haven't been putting enough in. And the other discussion I want to have is there are things that are coming out of that capital and replacement reserve that should be at their capital items, yes, such as books for the library, but they should be funded entirely by an annual tax funding, not coming out of a replacement reserve because they're small items and they're something that happens every year.
Okay.
So I think it's a discussion for a much bigger day. So I think at this point, I would just move receipt of the report for information.
Actually, Fred, Michael here.
Comment?
Michael here, Fred.
You agree? I'm sorry. Yes, Michael?
Actually, I have to agree with, I do agree with Alison. I think this is a complex subject. I think even after the rest of the meeting we have today, there may be other opinions. I would like to see this received for information and set it aside, whether it's for a separate or more detailed discussion within a few months, Fred. I just think there's so much more to add, and I second the comments made by Alison.
Thank you, Michael. Any other comments? Yeah, I think this is a critically important topic, and I appreciate the work that Raj has put it on it. But I think it also identifies that there's additional areas that need to be at least considered or addressed by staff and management. And I think the FAC has an important role as it relates to this particular topic. And I personally don't have any issues with extending it for a couple months, perhaps to allow if there's any additional work being done and looking at the supporting information, and also for a more fulsome discussion by the committee. But I think it's a big deal, recognizing this, as Alison mentioned, and we've kind of brought it up before. There's a lot of things on the horizon right now that seem to be moving forward, and I think this is a fairly critical discussion. Are we all in favor in doing that? So we're going to receive the report today.
Thanks for information.
Actually, the subsequent recommendation is along that line, so we might
Okay, you can see that.
amend that. So essentially what I had proposed as a recommendation was that council, oh, can we go, sorry,
There.
lost it. So what I had put as a recommended recommendation was that essentially the Finance Advisory Committee advised council to instruct staff to prepare a report for the next Finance Advisory Committee comprised of a 5-year projection of capital funding requirement and reserve balances so that the Finance Committee can advise council on whether the annual 1.5% policy-based tax rate increase should be extended for a further period of time. Essentially, it would allow further discussion of this report in addition to, but you may want to revise that recommendation.
Well, my problem with that recommendation is it's only asking us to advise on whether the 1.5, and the 1.5 was to be in addition to what was already being put in, which has disappeared, the whatever. So I would say whether the 1.5 is adequate and should be extended.
Yeah, and whether the, well, I guess, and whether the, would you call it the current, it's not really current anymore because it expires this year, right? So
I think we said for
an
14
extension,
years,
extension of that policy or a
Yeah.
new policy that may be 1.5 or maybe another amount, right?
Yeah, and just general reserve contributions generally. I mean, there was a whole bunch that have disappeared and been rolled into the supposedly covered by the 1.5, which they were never intended to be.
What if we just removed 1.5 and said the
On
annual
whether
reserve policy?
an annual policy based,
Yeah,
base tax increase be addressed.
Or just the total amount of required contributions to reserves
Yeah.
is adequate.
fine.
I like that.
Yeah.
On whether the total, where am I?
Whether the current reserve contributions are adequate
Sorry, where are we? On whether the,
and what, yeah.
here?
Yeah, just delete that whole bit and just say whether,
Whether,
and on the adequacy of the current reserve
ooh,
program.
whether on
Adequacy of the current
adequacy
reserve.
Okay.
at the current reserve contributions.
Period.
That's
Anyway,
it.
can I just ask a question? Is this something that has been maybe discussed by council in the last 6 months or so?
That's not.
Is that a fair question or not a fair question?
That's a
Sure.
fair question.
Hmm?
It's a good question.
Has council been talking about this?
No.
No,
No? You guys.
Other than the fact that I voted against the budget specifically because of the reserve contribution.
That's cool.
Is it balances in plural?
Well, it's not, it's capital funding, it's replacement funding too. I mean, I just would say the adequacy of its reserve program. The whole thing needs to be looked at.
yeah,
You need to have
Yeah.
contribution at the end of that sentence.
Sorry, I missed what you said, Allison.
I think that's getting there. Yeah.
yeah, as general and as all encompassing as humanly possible.
Yeah.
And you might want a 10-year projection for capital funding. So the other question that goes with this is, when is the asset management plan going to be finished?
10 years.
I don't,
No, I'm deadly serious. It's not something that is going to be finished anytime soon.
Because the other thing is, when we did this whole thing in 2008, we did it because we knew we had to put something away. We also knew that whatever we were planning on wasn't going to be adequate, and it would be substantially revised when the asset management plan was done, which was being talked about being done back in 2008, and it keeps getting put on the back burner.
Well, we've done a lot of work on it, Allison. It's just that things keep on changing and we do systems.
Well,
that-
we haven't seen much. We haven't had a report from the guy that's supposedly working on it for months now, other than he compiled the sort of, do we have a list?
Essentially,
now?
just to give you an informal update on it, Allison, it's sort of back in the hands of staff, and to see how to improve this information. So we had the consultant work on it last year and this year, and we've made good progress on it. But given the resources that we have, I mean, I picked it up and I was able to work on it for 3 days in the past 3 months. And we just don't have the resources to sit there and continuously work and improve the information. So we need to get a team meeting together to see how we're going to address that and how we're going to move forward with it in light of all the competing demands that we have on staff right now. We don't have the in-house resources to do the amount of work that's required on it, and nor do we have the appropriate funding to hire somebody from the outside at this point in time. I mean, we are chugging away at it to answer your question. So,
but it will be relevant as it relates to the next budgeting cycle, right? Because you'll at least in a determination of at least an interim position to be taken to ensure that there's continued funding.
Is there more grant money available?
The relevancy of the asset management plan on budget is only applicable if the asset management plan is complete, and it's far from complete. And to Raj's point, if you start to think about the number of assets that the municipality owns, it's a pretty comprehensive exercise that requires dedicated resources, which we don't have. So
Yeah.
what I've suggested is that the team focus in on one asset class for now, and to try to get a best handle on managing one asset class through the asset management protocols.
Yeah.
And then once we get a handle on that asset class, we can roll it out. But take roads, for example, is generally an relatively easy class to start with, because it's a fairly easy one to address. But what we've done is zeroed in on one subclass within roads, which is culverts.
Yeah.
And so, we have something like 386 culverts, and we have to to do it right, we have to get the true age and condition of each culvert, or at least an estimate, and then apply the replacement period, and then understand what's the appropriate rate that we need to be charging through tax roll or taxation to address that. So that's just for culverts, right? And so we then extrapolate that out to all the other asset classes that we have, and it becomes a rather significant task.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I think that we've had a chance to see the first report that was done.
Oh, right.
So I have seen that, and I appreciate what's involved. Trust me, in some of the companies I've worked for.
Yeah,
but
I bet.
The other part of it relates to the fact is, I think we can't let a budgeting cycle lose a cycle for that. There needs to be some provision in the upcoming year to ensure that there's a level of continued funding.
Right.
Higher that at some specified level, whatever that is, as a percentage, just to keep that thing rolling. I don't think we can get comfortable with allowing that to wait for another year.
No, I agree. Sorry, Fred, I misunderstood you. You're absolutely correct. We do need to continue to invest in our asset renewal.
That's right, and that's why I was saying, I was kind of asking whether council has at least kind of kicked that one around, at least at this point in time. That even though that policy is coming to an end, cycle-wise, I think it's got to remain active beyond obviously the current year.
Right. It hasn't been.
That's almost a starting point,
It hasn't been on council's agenda, but I know all councillors are keenly aware of it.
Okay, thank you. Any other? There's nothing else that we have to do on this. Oh, we've got this point here.
I'll move the motion.
All in favor? I should
Aye.
first mover and seconder, Rob, Joyce?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on then. Thank you.
Okay. Steph,
Long-term loan analysis.
Steph, can you go to the full PowerPoint presentation? Thank you. And to the next slide as well, and to the next one after that. So I've got a slide here on basically the long-term borrowing. So what this slide is showing is that the borrowing limit for the municipality is generally the borrowing limit for the municipality is 25% of annual revenues. So that means that in total, the municipality could borrow up to $46 million. Currently, the municipality is only borrowed 4.6 million. And if we include the fire hall, community center, and community center, the total will be approximately 11.6 million. As you can see, it'll be 11,573,000 to be exact. That means that the municipality will only be utilizing about 25% of its total borrowing room. And that's a decent amount of borrowing for a community our size. A lot of communities have borrowed way above this amount. The other thing that I wanted to point out is, just in the interest of time, I'm going to make it really quick. And that's important to note that the borrowing for capital projects is locked in at a fixed rate. And typically for long-term projects, you borrow for up to about 30 years, but you're locked in for 10 years, after which the interest rate changes. And the current rate for borrowing long-term debt from the Municipal Finance Authority, who we're required to from as municipalities, is 1.45%. I'm going to open it up to any questions.
So that 536,000, it's 25% of our tax revenue, Raj, or our total revenue that the debt servicing can't exceed?
The debt servicing is 25%. So the debt servicing cost can't exceed 25% of the revenue. So
And it doesn't
that
matter what
number and
kind of
interpolated it to come up with the $46 million that we could borrow up to.
And that's total revenue, Allison.
Total revenue, yes.
Yeah, provincial grants and everything?
Yes.
Okay.
No, not for like the capital grants, but
No, the
like
small
the
communities grant.
small community operating grants. Yes.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this topic? Thank you. There's no recommendation. Oh, there is a recommendation. Okay.
Basically, therefore be it resolved that the Finance Advisory Committee advised Council that the current anticipated levels of long-term debt for the community lands, fire hall, community center, facility, and the water treatment plan represent a prudent amount of borrowing for a community the size of Bowen Island. So it's not really a recommendation, it's just endorsement of.
Well, we've already done it, so can't we just leave it for?
It's nice to have this, Allison, to acknowledge that you guys have, it's a good way to mark and track things that have come through this committee, not getting buried in minutes.
Well, I'm not sure that we can have a agreement on it, what's prudent, but.
I guess, okay, what are the concerns that as it relates to this recommendation?
So it's. Raj, you have the committee advising council of what the debts are.
Or Fred, that was a question to the rest of the committee,
Oh,
right?
sorry.
I was.
Okay.
Well, sorry.
Oops.
Steph,
I'm
that's
pretty-
Steph, that was a question to the committee just to see if they have concerns with.
Okay.
I'm just trying to, based on Allison, I think had a comment. I just wanted to make sure, is there any concerns as it relates to that statement?
To me, it's not an unreasonable amount, which is different, I think, from prudent.
Okay.
Well,
Because there are some people that don't like.
So we
borrowing
could
or
we
anything.
replace
well, it's
planned
reasonable.
is not an unreasonable, yeah.
Okay,
Okay. Or is it an appropriate amount or whatever? Yeah.
Or is a reason, I mean, you got to take the word represent out there, stuff. And say is not.
Yeah. I mean, I guess though, Well, one question that I would have and just throw out there is like, what if we find ourselves in the near future needing to take on more debt?
Thank you. Thank you, Liam, because that's my question too.
Exactly.
That's exactly my question. This is yeah.
Well, this
Thank
is
you.
identified specific projects, right? I'm assuming that additional borrowings would be potentially against prospective other projects.
Yeah. and they
But
may or
we're
may-
currently looking at this as it relates to the projects that are currently underway.
Right.
I
Haven't
guess-
extended that reasonableness to anything beyond that at this point.
Yeah,
I have to go back and look at our financial guidelines because we did put something in there about debt, because when we did those guidelines, so the financial guidelines policy, there is a policy with respect to debt, I believe. And we looked at sort of, the philosophy of no debt to maximizing your debt, or somewhere in between. And we looked at small communities and what they were financing for, and sort of had a range in there. Now that was back in 2008. So those numbers are probably, I'm thinking, remembering our debt ceiling at being 17 million. So this 46 million is a very different number.
Okay,
So
well,
I'm uncomfortable voting on this motion without looking to see what our policies say. That's why I sort of changed it to saying not an unreasonable amount.
I'm having difficulty with it for maybe a slightly different reason. We've spent a lot of time talking about what it would mean to the average household for the community center. And there isn't a line here talking about what this total would mean to the average household. And it does not include projections of catastrophic stuff can happen. And I'm really worried about that. And I know that we've got a cushion for what we should be able to borrow up to, but as somebody who's pretty tight with their dollar, I never believe in going that far. Plus, we're at an extraordinary low interest rate. So if we end up with the need for a future expenditure, there's no guarantee that we're going to be at that low interest rate. And finally, we've never really said as a committee that we have endorsed each and every decision that has led to this point. So I'm not ready to, I'll abstain if necessary, but I'm not ready to vote in favor of something like this.
You can't abstain.
Okay, then I will vote against it.
well,
So I just found our financial policy, and we policy 14 on debt management. So maybe not, it says the community charter sets maximum amounts municipality can borrow from external sources. Every effort should be made to keep debt levels at a minimum.
Yeah.
However, there may be instances where borrowing money is appropriate, i.e. financing major infrastructure projects. Borrowing in such instances allows the cost of the project to be spread out over the useful life of the asset. This results in the cost being paid by future beneficiaries and not just by current taxpayers. The policy itself says projects that are to be funded by external debt should be submitted to council with a business case, including recommendations on how the debt will be serviced. So
Okay.
it's, I think in the introductory to some of these sections it was talking about still needed a little more work. So
can I ask a question as it relates to this? Because I'd like us not to get hung up too much on this one. Should we rather just eliminate, as it relates to the recommendation, the reference to the 46 million?
That would help.
I don't want that to be a target.
No.
So
wasn't the intention.
I know. So I get rid of that, and I'd actually, leave put a period after 11.6. I mean, that's pretty clear in terms of that. Therefore, it's resolved that the current anticipated level of long-term debt for projects, or well, and that's pretty specific, the projects we've identified.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of agreed to pretty much everything here.
Yeah.
Is not an unreasonable amount of borrowing. I don't know, I can't clarify. I mean, for a community the size of Bowen, I think
We haven't done the comparisons.
I would say,
I just know from being the deputy inspector of municipalities who approved all long-term borrowing for
Yeah.
the last 6 years for every community in the province, that we're well within a reasonable amount.
Yeah.
So anyway, but you probably don't want to rely on that. So
No, we don't. We have not been presented with any borrowing numbers for any of the other communities the size of Bowen. So I think we just have to put the period at the end of borrowing.
Period where?
I'm good with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, borrowing and delete that for our community. Yeah, delete that.
How's that?
Yeah, Raj, a quick question. Cross Island Passway isn't in there. Is that because it's a relatively small amount compared to the other ones, or is there?
We didn't have any external borrowing to fund that project.
Okay,
That was all grant and reserve based, right?
Grant and reserve based. That's
thank
correct.
you.
Okay, how's that look?
I would like to see some reference, whether it's in a note or whatever, as to what the overall cost to the average household would be.
Well, maybe at this point, we should just receive the report for information.
Yeah,
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
You sure?
If that,
that's easier.
if that gets the
Okay.
wheels moving, I vote for that.
Yeah, because I think this is something we're gonna probably have to look at the whole policy and the whole, yeah.
Okay. Receive the report.
Yeah.
Okay,
Period. Receive the report for information. Yeah.
yeah. And we're subject to further committee discussion.
Yeah.
Okay,
At a future meeting.
I think we're gonna run over. Hopefully you guys are around for a while.
God,
You're getting hungry.
who's
Pardon?
chairing this?
So just this top one, we can,
Yeah.
Fred,
The Finance Advisory Committee received the staff analysis provided at the for information. Yeah, we got it.
Okay.
Delete the second paragraph.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll move on.
I'll help you with that recommendation. I mean, that afterwards stuff.
Okay,
well, that's fine, but I think that's simple.
okay. Can I have a
I
mover,
moved
please?
that.
Somebody?
I moved it, it's Allison.
Okay, Alice, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Okay, Alice, seconder?
I'm not on the big screen. I haven't. What
Maybe
am I-
Rob, you can second that. Thank you. Just see your hand move up and down. Okay, all in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you.
Phew.
COVID-19. 6.4.
6.4, I have a brief update on the financial impacts of COVID at this point in time. So in terms of recreation user fees, they've been hit harder than any other area in the organization. Our recreational programming revenues are trending at about 85,000 lower than they were at the same time last year. Some of this lost revenue is offset by programming expenditure reductions. As mentioned at the last Financial Advisory Committee meeting, and we talked about this earlier, we have not been hit as drastically as larger municipalities that have a lot more in recreation and community facilities, and as Allison had mentioned, have gaming revenues, so from casinos. Our building permit revenues are trending on budget right now and don't seem to have been hit as hard as it was anticipated they would be. Staff are in the process of working on the emergency management claim for reimbursement of eligible expenditures that were incurred during the pandemic. And I will provide a further update on this at the next FAC meeting. That's kind of all I have at the moment.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll move on. Thank you, Raj.
Thank you. Oh boy, that was a lot of items.
I know it was. Okay, 7 updates.
Patrick, you're up. Are you there?
Yeah. Is there?
I don't see Patrick there.
There he is, he's coming. And
Okay.
Aaron,
We got, I think, three items to talk about.
And these are high level updates before we move into the closed meeting, correct?
That's right.
Patrick, you're muted. Can't hear you.
He's not got a mute sign.
Oh, I don't, I see.
it usually takes them a little while to get set.
Oh, I've moved to an area with good Wi-Fi then, I guess.
Yeah.
He's talking, but we can't.
Yeah,
Can you go to Rachel's or Annette's computer? And take over?
Oh, he's in
Maybe
the,
it's good we can't hear what he's saying right this minute.
where is he? The municipal offices down in the cove?
Yeah,
yeah, he is.
Oh,
Yeah.
Until the beginning
The
of
words he might
September.
have for it.
Do we want to start with Aaron and then
Let's start,
move to
yeah.
Patrick, and maybe Patrick can troubleshoot?
Okay,
If Aaron is available to talk about the fire hall.
okay.
there he is.
Aaron, there he is.
Hi.
Isn't that in the closed meeting, Liam?
They're doing a high level on all, Raj.
Oh, on all of them. Okay, sorry,
Last meeting
sorry.
minutes.
At least three of them,
Thank
right?
you.
On 3 items.
Yeah.
So it's just a high level on the fire hall?
High level for the open minutes.
All right. So I think Hope was actually going to present this, but I'm not sure where she is. So,
I've
I'm sitting
texted
in a
her.
desk. I'm here.
so I was just going to give her a minute. I was hoping Patrick was going to go first, but
Okay.
sorry about that.
Yeah, I think Patrick's still challenged with the audio part.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't have any notes here in front of me, but I guess just a high
Liam,
level.
do you have anything on anything? Water
On the, well, on the fire hall, I think it's safe for us to
Not
say.
fire hall, but any of the,
Oh, sorry, Steph, go ahead.
any of Patrick's items, just to buy some for Aaron and while Patrick's trying to get his sound going. Any secret information that can be public?
No, I think I need Patrick to give the update on the treatment plant and
Okay, I'll call Hope.
We can go back and talk about statutory reserves.
Oh,
Whose
the,
idea was
okay.
that?
and for the sewage treatment plant, was that to be a closed item or are
Yes.
we,
Yes.
I think,
Yeah, that's enclosed. They're just doing a very high level brief, open.
Yeah.
right.
Just
Doesn't work.
Oh,
You
there
are-
it
you are-
does
you are-
now.
What'd you do?
oh, hello.
We heard you.
That's the
Oh, you
first
heard
time
me?
we've heard you.
Yeah.
Okay, this is, nothing's been working down here, which we're moving up to the municipal hall soon, so hopefully that'll all be resolved. But I'm glad you can hear me now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. So, sorry about
And this
that.
is just a high level discussion.
Yeah, high level discussion. So the water treatment plant is on track with the scheduled for completion in April or May of 2021. All of the underground infrastructure is complete. All of the in-slab electrical, underground electrical, building slab has been installed. The walls have, the framing of the walls is complete. The cuff filters, the ceramic filters are being manufactured in Purifics plant in London, Ontario, still scheduled for delivery in November. The bolted steel tank has been ordered and is being manufactured off-site.
I lost you.
Um,
You have to be closer, I think.
Okay, Can
As
you
soon as
hear
you
me?
went sideways, your voice kind of disappeared.
All right, I'll be very careful to face the microphone. So overall, we're about 35% complete construction. The project budget and schedule are on track.
We lost you again.
I can provide some more detail in the closed meeting.
Okay. We'll leave any maybe questions and we'll address that at another point. Anything? Okay, so that's on the water treatment plant. Okay, the other 2 points.
So the multi-use path project, we've posted a RFP for design services from a consultant team to confirm, review alternatives and produce design and tender documents for phase 1 of the path. And that would be, so they'll be looking at the section from Cardina to Artisan Lane. The primary section that we're targeting is from the school where the current path ends up to Artisan Lane. That will be the priority so that we can meet the deadlines for the grant funding that we've got for the project. We need to have a portion of that complete by the end of March to obtain the Bike BC grant funding, and end of 2021 is the deadline for the TransLink funding. We've been told by TransLink as well that there may be opportunity to apply for additional grant money from them. This is a carryover from previous years, and they seemed open to, if we get into our design process and find that we need a bit more money to complete a scope of work that makes the most sense, we may have opportunity for additional funds there. So that, well, we hope to have a design team in place. We've got some by mid-September. We've got some survey underway, and then be in a position to start constructing phase 1 early in 2021. That's the overall, and the other aspect of the scope of work we're looking for from the design team is a review of the overall concept plan, developing a long-term phasing plan with cost estimates to give us a better sense of what the overall project is expected to cost.
Mhm.
And in particular, revisit the section past Carter Road, where we ran into significant challenges with the S-bend on Grafton Road, taking another look at the water line alignment. That would be part of the review of the overall plan.
Okay. Any comments or questions?
Just one, Brett, I've seen a lot of orange survey, what looked like orange, things hanging from trees along Grafton Road. Is the road right-of-way surveying going on? I saw Bennett out the other day.
Yeah, there's a survey to pick up the terrain, the road right-of-way, edge of pavement, top of bank, significant trees, all of that.
Okay.
Which will be required for the design work.
Okay.
Patrick, quick question. The focus on going from the school up to Artisan versus the school down to the ferry, is that largely just a timing issue with having to talk to Metro and all that on the lower portion?
Mainly, yes. Metro is supportive of widening the path past the library. It's the next section, which is the private property on the corner with the retaining wall right up against the sidewalk, that would involve, even if there's support, that would involve some property transfer of some kind. Those types of things take time.
Yeah.
It's possible we could sort all of that out quickly, but And it may be that that's also part of the phase 1 work. Would be great if we could do, you know, the entire missing pieces from Cardina up to Artisan.
Yeah. Well, it'd be nice if we could start those talks because they might take some time, so that we're ready when the fund.
We have started those.
Great. Thanks, Patrick.
Comments or questions? Thank you. Fire hall, I think, is our next one. Do you have somebody, Aaron, that's going to speak?
You're muted.
Hope is going to be speaking on this one.
Okay. Hope, and at this point, this is just a high level discussion.
Hi there. Sorry,
Hi.
I'm just in the city right now. So I'm gonna just be quite brief and just that the project was tendered in summer 2019 and we received 2 unfavorable responses. And since then, staff have been working to review the project in more detail to see where we can have potential cost savings. We are working with our architect team on that, and we are looking to engage someone to help us revise the scope to meet our project budget. And I can give some more details on that in the closed meeting a little later today.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because I think we were aware of that information. So thank you. Any comments or questions before we move on? Thank you. We're next intended to move to a closed meeting. Very clear on that point. Within your agenda is a specified